So, Stellaris 1.6 is coming, and it's going to be a lot of bug fixes and quality of life improvements from the looks of it. And I'm super excited about some of these. If we just look at sort of a list, a to-do list was published a couple of weeks ago now for what we can expect to see and hope for in the coming content. And some of this is very, very exciting. We've got the option for possibly deeper federations so that we can actually turn our federation into a single state rather than just a collection of them, which would be great. I love that idea. We've got super weapons and planet killers. I'm sort of up in the air about that one. Planet killers could be really interesting, or they could be terrible. I was expecting something more along the lines of that sort of thing where you could glass a planet with the Fanatic Purifier's new Armageddon bombardment stance, but obviously that doesn't do anything like that. Really, you can obviously glass a planet, but it's super slow and tedious, and I would rather wipe that planet so that I could take over it myself. Maybe if the super weapons or planet killers would wipe off that planet and then let me terraform it back to a state where I could live on it, that would be awesome. Story events and reactive narratives, pretty cool. Interesting mechanics for pre-FTLs, also awesome. Dreadnoughts and Titans, yes. A Galactic Space UN, also cool if we can see that hopefully being more interesting than the current faction system. If you watched my State of Stellaris video, then you'll know that I was less than impressed by the faction system. The fact that it is, after a few games, very predictable. It really needs to be more factions so that I don't know what I'm going to get the instant I start a game. Like I said, I would like to have multiple factions per ethic and maybe be able to manipulate those factions with using my influence to spend that to manipulate those factions for what I want. So when I'm ready to expand, I want to push my factions towards the militant faction, the supremacy factions, so that, you know, I get those bonuses when I'm trying to conquer another empire. But when I'm at peace, I might want to push them towards a defensive military faction to try and take away those supremacists, because they're being a bit of a pain now that I'm at peace and I'm trying to build up and focus on the internal empire and building it up. That sort of thing would be very cool. Obviously, I doubt that we'll see that from Paradox. I think that's going to have to come from modders, which would be nice. There is no, obviously, mention of any new traditions, which is a shame. Again, I would like to see more traditions. I would like to have to choose between them rather than simply getting all of them. I think it would allow for more customization of my empire. It would help me feel like I'm not just ending up like everyone else, because about 150 years into the game, when those in-game crises roll around, you should have all of them. And that just means that everyone is the same. It sort of homogenizes them, which is a shame because it offers a great position to really customize your empire, really get it so that it is more unique, and that's really what I was after. Obviously, I've played games where I've min-maxed and I've optimized, and now I just really want to roleplay my civilization, and I sit down and I think about the ethics and I think about what sort of civ I'm building, and I want that more customization. I don't want it to sort of become homogenized. There's a reworking and balancing of in-game crises. That's good. Great. They're kind of dull right now. We'll talk about that more later on in the video. But as it is now, they sort of feel like if you're ready for them, they're too easy. If you're not ready for them, they're too hard. It's deeper mechanics and unique portraits for synthetics. But most exciting, reworks to war to address Doomstacks. Doomstacks. Oh, I'm so excited. And you may be asking yourself, wait, what's a Doomstack? Well, just in case you don't know, this is a Doomstack. And they're probably the thing that I like least about this game. It sort of becomes, who's got the biggest numbers? In this example here, which you can see, I've got a massive fleet. Nobody else in the galaxy can match mine, and I could easily build more ships. But I don't need to. The fallen empires are gone. The Praetorians have been defeated, and all that's left is this giant fleet. There is one other civilization left. They have about 20 to 30k ships at any given time. And so, what are their tactical options against my Doomstack? None. If you're the lesser in this situation, then you've lost straight away. No amount of being clever, no amount of tactics will save you from that Doomstack. If you're semi-close, you might have a shot in that you can attack their spaceports, hopefully destroy those before engaging their fleet, crippling it, and then rebuilding yours in the hopes that their weakened fleet won't be able to be rebuilt quite as fast. But for that to happen, you've obviously got to have a position where your two fleets are fairly evenly matched in both terms of technology and not hard countering one another. And it's terrible because it really reduces warfare down to just an unenjoyable mess. And a part of this is because, for example, if I want to take my fleet and attack someone, I'll generally make sure that, number one, mine is bigger than theirs, because I will never attack someone who has a larger fleet. Their fleet is too big, and I know that once my fleet is gone, maybe early game I could rebuild in time to pose some sort of resistance, but for the majority of the game, you cannot rebuild your fleet fast enough to pose a threat to a fleet that has just destroyed yours. I've had many games in which War in Heaven occurs, my fleet gets destroyed, and then the Fallen Empire just rolls in and takes my planets, because what can I do? I can't replace my ships quick enough to provide a counter to theirs. And that's Doomstacks, that's the problem. They reduce warfare to slamming your two fleets together. You can't repair your ships fast enough for there to be a counter, and it makes warfare a mopping up operation, because once that massive fleet battle has been engaged, if you're the winner, then congratulations, there will be no further resistance. It's time for you to just simply roll in and take over other planets until they end up surrendering to you. And I've done this where I went up against an empire which controlled the entire quarter of a galaxy, and I was expecting this could be a interesting war, and it wasn't, because we fought in the first border star on their system, and that was the war ended, and then it took forever to go in and conquer their habitats, to conquer their planets, and it was just slow and tedious, and they could not mount a resistance against me. So what we need to do is we need to change the systems to favour small fleets, multiple fleets, because that will, number one, allow you to resist more. You're not going to just lose all of your ships at once and now you pose absolutely no threat whatsoever. If you have the game favouring multiple small fleets, then losing one, I've got 4 more who can still offer some sort of resistance. Now obviously that requires a rethink of the mechanics, because while I could field, let's say that I have 40k worth of ships, my opponent has 30k worth of ships, I could field 4 10k fleets, they could field 3 10k fleets. It's in their best interest to have all of their ships in one place, because that will allow them to counter my ships. It's therefore in my interest to also have all of my ships together in one place. So I need some sort of mechanic that prevents me from having all of my ships in one place, so that I have to spread them out throughout the systems. And we also need a mechanic which allows us to replace our ships quickly. Like a lot more quickly than we do right now. And so I would like to propose 2 things. The first would be the ability to build military dockyards as a sort of space station. You could do it as, say, a spaceport mod, but I just like to build structures in space in my empire, and you would be limited in the number of these until you get technologies to research them. But what these stations would do is they would build multiple ships at once. So currently, if I wanted to build 5 corvettes out of one space station, I would build one, and then I would build the next one once the first one is done, and that's somewhat slow. But if I have a shipyard in that system, then depending on my technology level, when I queue up 5 corvettes, maybe it starts building all 4 of them at once. And this allows me to churn out my ships a lot quicker, to obviously replace whatever I'm losing, which allows me to get back on my feet a lot quicker if I lose a battle, lets me get back in the fight and put up some more resistance against my opponents. It also provides a target for them, so they want to push in to the core of my empire rather than just sitting around the edge and snapping up small border planets in order to get your war score high enough. That's what I do typically. I don't go all the way across the empire in order to pick off prime targets. I just conquer each planet as I go in, because it's quicker that way. Slow but effective. But this would enable you to have, more tactical options, and the fact that that space yard is going to give you the ability to replace ships a lot quicker, so that's also a target that I might want to destroy, which means that I have to push into the empire a lot further in order to try and find where your particular shipyards are. Did you build them way on the galactic edge, or are they in the core of your empire? Where are they? I've got to find them. I've got to take that out so that I can sort of cripple your ability to replace your fleet. So yeah, that's really important. The ability to replace ships within your empire so that you can put up resistance, so that wars don't simply become one big battle. There's large fleet engagements. You have to deploy multiple fleets across the area. You've got tactical options then of, I can push one fleet into their space while holding a defensive line across here. It would just make for so much more interesting battles, but in order to do that we need to obviously address Doomstacks. We've got to get rid of that. So what can we do? Whatever we do, it's not going to please everyone. There have been a variety of suggestions on what we should be doing to address Doomstacks. Some people want something as simple as a flanking bonus. I don't think this ultimately supplies an answer. Obviously, in a multiplayer game, you could successfully flank a larger fleet, get your flanking bonus, and simply destroy them. But this isn't going to address the problem of having all the ships in one place during a war. Because all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Doomstack and then I'm going to split it so that I don't have the ability to be flanked, address both of the threats of my opponent's fleets, and I'm still going to have all of the ships in one battle, and you could still end up with that problem with the war being tedious from that. So I don't think the flanking bonus is going to work, and that's on top of the fact that unless you're playing it with all human players, you've got a problem in which the AI is going to struggle to successfully flank you. So you've got another problem going on there. So flanking bonuses, I don't see them working. What I would like to see is perhaps a fleet size cap, dictated maybe by some sort of technologies. Other things like admirals could boost it, so that you have a penalty of some sort once your fleet gets too big. And that way you've got more small fleets. Maybe that could work, but I think my ideal system would be some sort of supply situation. Because right now, you have naval capacity, which is supplied by spaceports. You've got enough spaceports to support 300k's worth of fleet power. But I can park that entire fleet in one place and just keep it in one system. How is that one small spaceport supposed to handle the entire Empire's supply of ships? It doesn't make sense from sort of like a in-game perspective. So we could have some sort of supply thing to say this sector of space can support X number of ships, and you've got, okay, I've got a 10k fleet in there. When I bring another 10k fleet in there, I can't supply them. I don't have enough ammunition and power cells going out to these ships, so I've got a problem with making sure they've got enough ammo, so their fire rate drops because they don't have the bullets to shoot out of their mass drivers. They don't have the power cells to power their drives. So that would encourage me, obviously, to split my fleet. You could build logistics outposts, which bolster your ability to support large fleets within your space, and you could also have maybe logistics ships, which help boost supply within enemy territory. And sort of the idea that I have is supply within enemy space becomes a problem, because if you're fighting an interstellar war, you've got a lot of bullets flying around, you've got a lot of energy cells to power your lasers, you need to replace those missiles that you're shooting. So how are you doing that? You need some sort of supply. It's going to be more difficult because your enemies' spaceports and whatnot aren't going to load you up. That's got to come from within your empire. And so you could have things like, if you're looking at the map right now, if I jump through enemy space and I leave unoccupied worlds behind me, then we could say that these worlds supply, say, shuttlecraft and raiders to attack my supplies as they come through, so my fleet gets weaker the further it gets from home space. And it would get even weaker if, say, an enemy fleet were to be parked between it and its supply line. So if I could get, for example, an invading fleet coming in, they're heading for my home world, but they're getting stretched a bit thin. So I send one of my fleets to park in behind them and cut them out from whatever is supplying them. And then I engage them with another fleet while they're weakened. Their fire rate's dropped because they don't have the energy to power their lasers. They don't have missiles to resupply. They don't have power cells, so their combat speed goes down, etc. So they need to secure planets, and they need to secure supply routes, and that means they need to have ships behind the main fleet to sort of try and protect those lines of supply, which means that they have obviously got to have secondary fleets in order to do that. Obviously this is open to a lot of balance, and I just think it would be so much better than the current system, because Doomstacks really do spoil the game. They make it boring. Why would you want them? Get rid of them. Do something. Just not a flanking bonus, because that still creates the problem, like I said, of having all of your ships, all of your eggs in one basket, one battle, the battle's over, congratulations, you've now won or lost the war. That's boring. So they need to introduce a system to promote multiple ships without simultaneously saying all of your ships can still be used in one place. So multiple fleets, but not all the fleets can be deployed in one place. They've got to be deployed strategically and whatnot. One thing that I would really like to see is some sort of static anomalies, maybe. Things like, say, an ion storm, which boosts the power of your energy weapons, so that you've got more tactical places that you can deploy your ships. And you might want to, you know, deploy your ship in the ion storm because that gives you an advantage, but your opponent wants to go and fight in an asteroid belt. And just static anomalies and environmental features that could boost your ships could also be interesting. But that's a completely different aside. The other thing, obviously, that we wanted to talk about was reworking endgame crises to make them more balanced against each other and the size state of the galaxy. That's an interesting one, because I've played a few games on tiny maps just to have a quick game. And you can't support a massive fleet on there because it's obviously that much smaller. But simultaneously, the crisis event doesn't take that into consideration, and so you still end up with a full-fledged crisis, and you're thinking, oh man, even if I held all the planets, because I've been in that situation, I can't field what I would normally be fielding at this point. You saw my previous game where I had a 200,000 fleet. I've played games in which I had 40,000, and that was sort of the max. Obviously this was before Ascension perks, which could help out quite a bit, but before that, 40,000 was the best that I could field, because there weren't enough planets in the galaxy for me to build enough starports for me to get more naval capacity. But the in-game crisis didn't care, and that sort of spoiled things. The State of the Galaxy is another interesting one. I used to play games in which I was pacifist. Pacifists can't conquer other planets, and so you would balkanize a lot of the larger empires when you go to war to split them into lots of little states. But these little states can't field a large fleet. They're going, oh, I'm a one-planet state. I have the naval capacity to put a few thousand fleet power into the field. I am absolutely useless against an unbidden fleet, and congratulations on the mess that you've made. Since you can't expand, you're not as big as you should be, and so your fleet is also quite small, but not as small as mine. The many fleets and their inability to coordinate with one another really meant that that could screw you over as well. But certainly one of the reworkings that we're hoping for is to see them make the other in-game crises more common. The unbidden currently show up 90% of the time. All the games I've played in Utopia so far, I've had one Praetorian show up. I have never seen the AI rebellion. I really don't want to have to cheat in order to get it to spawn, because I want to play Iron Man. I just like it better, and I can't get the AI rebellion to spawn. I have played several games in which I've tried to stack the deck as much as possible, and I still end up with the unbidden. So that would really be nice. It would be cool if we could see it sort of be 33%, 33%, 33%. So you've got a 1 in 3 chance of any of those happening, so that I don't have to go, damn it, I just spent forever trying to get the AI rebellion to spawn and I got the unbidden again. Should I just fight them, or should I just try again? Because I'd really like to try that AI rebellion. Make it more common. The other thing that I'd like to see is this is relating specifically to the unbidden. Again, I haven't had a chance to play the Praetorians too much in Utopia, so I really can't say what state they're in. I imagine that they're much the same as they usually are. But again, the unbidden tend to show up more, so we'll talk about them. One thing that I would like to see with them is to move them to the galactic core when they spawn. I'm saying that in part because they keep spawning inside my core. Even when I play a tall empire, I'm quite small, they spawn inside my space. Like, here's my homeworld, and there's the unbidden portal. And that means that all their initial expansion is inside my space. It's taking away from me, and because I occupy all the space around that portal, they can't go, I'm going to take from some of this, and I'm going to take from some of that empire. It's just, it's annoying. It does cripple me, and it's meant that I've had to pretty much stop whatever I'm doing in game around the year 2300. And just sit my fleets down, because they spawn somewhere for me between 2300 and 2350. They will spawn. And I need to have my fleets ready in my home system to counteract them. I'm convinced that spawn is weighted so that they spawn inside a player's sphere of influence, because it happens so much. And it's so infuriating, because it means that my game is entirely slowed down. I don't want to risk having my fleets outside of my own space, because that just means that I usually end up losing my homeworld before I can get my fleets back into place, because I decided to pick a fight with someone. And that's really annoying. But beyond my personal problems, it would be nice to have them spawn in the galactic core, spawn a bunch of star systems for them to occupy, and that way you can sit down some dimensional anchors straight off the bat. And that would help prevent simply rushing the portal. Every time that I've beaten them, you just rush the portal, hit them hard. If you've got a second smaller fleet or a Federation fleet, you attack from two sides, so that one fleet gets caught up fighting the massive cluster of ships that ends up attacking you because they all jump back into their home system, and you're fighting 6 unbidden fleets at 50k strength, so you've got a 300k unbidden fleet jumping into the system, usually right on top of you so that you don't have the range, and then you just send the Federation fleet round the back and it destroys the portal and you win. And they've been in the game for about, if you're ready for them, less than a decade before they're gone. So that's really, rushing the portal's a bit of a problem. It doesn't make them feel like a particular crisis. If you spawn them in an area in the galactic core, you can add a bit of territory for them to control and lay down some dimensional anchors, because if you do it in the current system where they spawn somewhere randomly, it means that if you wanted to put down multiple dimensional anchors and expand their territory straight away, it would cripple the empire that they spawn in, and that's usually me, so I don't want that. But I do want them to have some larger territory for them to occupy. They've got the anchors so that you can't simply rush the portal straight away. And so the galactic core puts them in the center, makes them a threat to everybody because they are sort of adjacent to the entire galaxy from there, and they can spread out, they can attack, you've got to push back in. But again, because we want to rebalance them for multiple fleets, we could do it so that rather than the dimensional anchors make the portal invincible, it's sort of like this is their supply system. Their ships are only stable within a certain range of that dimensional anchor, so they need to push out, and the further they get away, the weaker their fleets get, so they need to push and then build another anchor so that they can push further. And that way, maybe we can address them having such massive fleets, because obviously you don't want to have a 300k stack of unbidden showing up all in one place when you've just rebalanced the game so that everyone's got a lot of small fleets, and instead of having one 200k fleet, you've got 10 20k fleets that all can't be in the same system at the same time. So that's one rebalance that needs to go out. But it would certainly make massive improvements so that wars are more interesting. They're not over in one battle. It's not a massive mop-up operation if you win. It's not a, oh well, I lost the battle, that's it, I can't rebuild my fleet in time to put up any resistance to the enemy. It would allow for more tactical deployment of your fleets. So many improvements, because the Doom stacks make war tedious, and that's something that needs to be addressed. You've probably been watching the video in the background. You saw that I defeated the enemy fleet. Mine was still intact, and that let me simply roll in and take whatever I wanted without any resistance. In a brief battle which lasted about 30 seconds, I had won that war, and they ceded 4 planets to me. Just like that. That's not enjoyable. You know? we could have had more space battles, we could have had tactics, we could have had thinking. Instead, I simply send my fleet to the planet that I want to claim, and then away we go. If they had beaten me, then possibly they could have steamrolled in and just taken over my space. They don't, because they're an AI and they're an idiot. But yeah, having won, I won. That was it. And it's boring. So Doomstacks, certainly whatever they address, it's going to be better than what we currently have. But I sincerely hope that it's not just flanking, because they simultaneously need to address the issue of replacing your ships and supplying a way to encourage multiple fleets spread out across your space. Multiple fleets, so that you have multiple smaller engagements rather than one big battle. And that's the core of this issue. One big battle. I don't want to send all of my ships into one area as one fleet. I don't want to send them all into one battle as 6 fleets. I want to have many smaller battles throughout the war so that it actually feels like an interesting encounter. So that's my opinion on Doomstacking and what we're expecting to see in 1.6. It's very exciting stuff. If you've got anything that you'd like to add, please leave a comment. My channel is tiny, and so I will actually in fact read them. Till next time.